Welcome to Ghost of a Podcast. I'm your host, Jessica Lanyadoo. I'm an astrologer, psychic medium, and animal communicator, and I'm going to give you your weekly horoscope and no bullshit mystical advice for living your very best life. Welcome back to Ghost of a Podcast. This week we're looking at the astrology of October 12th through the 18th of 2025. But before we get into the details of this week's astrology, let's just take a moment to talk for a moment about what's happening right now in the world, and in particular, Saturn and Neptune. So Saturn is conjunct to Neptune. It's not exact yet. It won't be exact until February of 2026. Saturn governs reality, and Neptune governs the surreal, escapism, fantasy, and high spirituality. So really, really different energetics than Saturn. This transit of Saturn and Neptune conjunct, it's going to be exact in the zodiac sign of Aries, but it is also active in the zodiac sign of Pisces. It has so many things. It meaningfully tests your ability to pass through reality, to identify what is real and what isn't real, what you see, what you feel, what you think. These things kind of shape your sense of reality. But Neptune being right on top of Saturn, it fuzzes the lines of what you can believe, of how you evaluate your own lived experience and how you fit into the collective, because Saturn has so much to do with how we fit into the collective, right? Our shared reality. When Saturn and Neptune meet, when they're conjoined, things fall apart and they take a new shape. On a personal level, this tests your mental health in a meaningful way. Saturn is depression and Neptune is anxiety. It can coincide on a personal level, and again, especially if it directly impacts your birth chart, it can coincide with either depressive or anxious feelings and thoughts, which, layer depression and anxiety together, and you can get burnout, exhaustion, overwhelm, all the feelings that a lot of us have been feeling. On a collective level, this transit tests structures. It coincides with the structures that hold up society, businesses, governments, systems that we rely on. Whether they're good or bad is not the point. It tests them, and there's a meaningful risk that they disintegrate, that they fall apart, especially if their foundations aren't solid. On both a personal and a collective level, this transit activates fear. It activates possibility and anxiety and the need to cope materially as well as spiritually. It's a lot. It's a lot. And the truth of the matter is, your ability to navigate fear and things that provoke fear is being tested in 2025. And it is going to be tested in 2026. And so being able to sort through your ingrained, patterned reactions to fear is really important, because fear is a part of life, right? And ignoring our fears or centering our fears, both of those extremes have meaningful problems. So finding ways of being curious about the way in which you experience fear and your reactions to it, and the way in which other people experience fear and their reactions to it, being curious about this empowers you to investigate, to learn more, and to use whatever fear you are experiencing as a way to get to know yourself better and to better understand your situation. When we think about this Saturn-Neptune conjunction, it's not surprising that we are experiencing things like Sora and the rise of AI and how it's infiltrating so much of online life. There are so many things that we have seen, that we are seeing, that are very real, from a genocide in Palestine to masked men in the United States kidnapping people on the street, attacking people on the streets. We see these things on our devices, and we also see an old lady hand feeding a bear and putting her hand directly in its mouth, and it looks as real as everything else we're seeing. How do you know what's real? How do you know what's real? But that, by the way, if you've seen that viral video, it is AI generated. We are living through a time where governments are vilifying trans people, like not even 1% of the population, right? Like a small minority of the population, vilifying trans people, people who are immigrants, who maybe, whether or not they're legal, I don't give a fuck. We're living through this period where our fear is being weaponized against us. Whether or not you've ever experienced or seen so much of what we're told to be scared of, we are told that those are the things that are actually dangerous to us, while we see things that are truly terrifying, like the rise of the climate crisis and racism and xenophobia and ableism, and we are told those things are not the problem. How do you know what's real? How do you know what the problem is? How do you know whose version of reality is the real version? The way that I engage with social media or the news feeds me news and social media, and also within that propaganda. And the way that you do it or your uncle does it is different. Who's to say whose is real? And then on top of it, here I am, I'm talking to you and I'm on astrology podcast. And is that real? Is astrology real? Is psychic shit real? You know, I communicate with animals. Is animal communication real? Cultivating a willingness and ability to sort through data is your job as a person in 2025 and beyond. And that requires that you find ways of navigating through your understanding of reality, which has to include fear, which does include fear. At this time, but honestly, at all times, I want to encourage you to not use spirituality or astrology as a way to bypass using common sense, educating yourself about what's happening in the world. Don't know more about the compatibility between sun signs than you do about who's in government where you live, about the history of resistance movements. Those things are really, really important. And astrology is important in its way, but we want to use the right tool for the right job. Now, listen, I use astrology for all kinds of things. And I'm not saying don't do that. I'm saying it is important to be critical in your thinking and to have critical thinking tools. It is really hard to believe what we see in a lot of ways right now. And that is because like there's propaganda, there's AI, there's all these things, but also things are scary. If you were to believe what you're seeing on the streets of Chicago, Memphis, Portland, if you were to believe what the implications of ICE's $75 billion budget means, if you were to believe these things, then you would understand the implications of what it means for Americans and, you know, as a ripple effect for the world. If you were to believe these things, then how would you behave? How do you behave when you believe that things are as scary as they are, as I believe they are, as I understand them to be? For a lot of people, there's a feeling of collapse that occurs. There's a feeling of totally falling apart. Like, I don't know what to do. There's nothing I can do. We're cooked. But the truth is, we are not cooked. We are not cooked. There is always something you can do. There are always choices that you can make. Some people experience outrage, just outrage, whenever they read a new headline or they experience a new injustice. And that's fair and reasonable. And also, outrage can burn you out. If outrage catalyzes you and helps you to choose actions that actually help the world, that help the vulnerable, that help yourself, great. But for most people, it's not a sustainable feeling. It's not a sustainable impulse. And so whether you experience collapse or outrage or anything else, the key here is to identify your emotional responses and to find healthier, more sustainable ways of coping with those responses so that you may stay in the game, stay in reality. Because the more people that check out, that disassociate, that allow their fragility to guide them, the worse things get. And this is, of course, especially true for people with power, which, of course, I am speaking to white people, right? It is really important to honor your fear, to create a space where you listen to your fear, but that you don't allow your fears to drive you to abandon accountability, responsibility. And we are responsible to each other. We are responsible to each other. You know, Angela Davis gave a talk very recently in Chicago, which I didn't get to see, but I saw some clips of online. And she said something that really just like, it just hit me right. She said that courage is collective, and that's real. Courage is collective. It's not an individual practice. It's something that we do with each other. Your courage can inspire me to be more brave. My courage can inspire you to lift the covers over your head. I'm not saying don't be scared. I'm not saying don't be scared. I'm not saying don't hide under the covers some days. I'm saying that hope is a practice. Determination to be a part of this historic time that we are living through. It's a choice that you have to make over and over and over again. Or if you don't make any choices, you have to understand that that's your choice. That's your choice. And listen, we don't always have good choices. We don't always have good options. We don't always have the spoons. That's all real. And also, these times that we are living in are affecting you and me and us and them. It's affecting all of us. Saturn is conjoined to Neptune. This is major astrological news, and it is playing out in the world around you. And how you show up for it, how you navigate it mentally, spiritually, and materially is a reflection on who you are. And it helps to build the world around you. This is not a Uranus transit. In a Uranus transit, it's time to innovate, to come up with something new. This instead is a time for coming together with community. Pluto in Aquarius reinforces that. And we'll talk about Pluto another time. But this is a time for dissolving systems that don't work and imbuing existing systems, whether they're hierarchies, governments, businesses, communities, whatever it may be, with more humanity, with more empathy and more care. It's not easy work. If it was easy work, it would be a 2-week-long transit. This shit is going on for a long time. We're going to be talking about it next year. We're going to be talking about it all year this year. And here we are. I am aware that when I talk about this scary social, political stuff, that a lot of you will just turn away, right? I'm aware of that. That some of you will be angry, will disagree, and I am aware that the very notion of thinking about a terrifying present or future feels like I'm trying to manifest it to some of you, and that's absolutely not the case. I want to empower you to have the tools to cope with the realities we find ourselves in. And that requires that you have the emotional skills, the psychological and spiritual resources in order to do it, right? In order to be present with scary stuff, because there are scary things happening. That's what's real. There are definitely going to be some of you who will say, or who have said, that I'm fear mongering, but I have looked up the word monger. And a monger is somebody who sells something, right? Somebody who's trying to sell you on something. If I'm trying to sell you on anything, it's personal accountability. If I'm trying to sell you anything, it's emotional intelligence and reliance. It's empathy, not just in how you feel, like so many of us are like empaths and we like feel all kinds of things, but using those empathetic feelings and impulses to catalyze you and me and us into action that expresses that empathy. I'm trying to sell you on caring about yourself and others with your actions, not just theoretically. And I have seen for the last decade this train of fascism and racism and xenophobia and transphobia and ableism. Like, I've seen this train barreling towards us, and I'm not alone. It's not just because I'm a psychic or I'm an astrologer. Those who study history, those who pay attention to politics, people who are able to see patterns and signs through mundane or spiritual pathways have seen it along with me. But it's not just about my or your ability to see what's coming. It's about our individual capacity to cope with the emotions and thoughts that it kicks off inside of us. If you have the skills to cope with fear, to cope with scary realities, then you are therefore able to be more present when those things happen. And that's an important life skill, my friends. That's an important life skill. Listen, life is sometimes scary. And right now is one of those times. I know a lot of you turn to astrology for predictions. What's going to happen? When will it happen? What will happen when it happens? And astrology can do that. Astrology does that. But what's the fucking point, right? If there's not a utility to that prediction, what is the point of the prediction? I want to encourage you to not look for the answer in order to find the path of how to engage in the present. Find your motivation, your inspiration to engage in the present based on what's happening in the present, not based on assurances of a future that is ultimately unknowable. As I was saying before, this is not a Uranus transit. It's Saturn and Neptune. Join organizations that are already doing good work, that have already been doing good work. Fall in line, connect with community. There are actions you can take to make your life better, to make the lives of the people around you better, and to invest in community. Take those actions, even if they're teeny tiny, even if it's like once a week, once a month, whatever. Do what you can. Do what you can, because it will make the world better. It will make you feel better. And because it's important, because what you do or don't do is important. Part of the risk of this Saturn-Neptune conjunction is it can make you feel so demoralized that it can convince you that what you have to say, what you do is meaningless. And that's not fucking true. It's just not true. So find meaning by practicing hope, by practicing determination, by investing in the wellness of this world, which includes you and your wellness, but is not exclusive to you and your wellness. Okay, I know it's a lot, but it's been on my heart and felt important to talk about. So let's finally get into this week's horoscope. Okay, so as promised, we are looking at the astrology of October 12th through the 18th of 2025. And our first exact transit of the week occurs on Monday, the 13th of October. On this date at 6:16 p.m. Pacific time, Venus will be at 0 degrees of Libra. It will have ingressed, aka moved into Libra earlier in the day, and it will be sitting exactly opposite to Neptune at 0 degrees of Aries and 12 minutes. Now, Venus opposite Neptune is a very stressful transit. Venus is related to belonging, like a sense of like connecting with other people, feeling safe in your relationships. And Neptune is anxiety, amongst other things. When Neptune sits opposite to Venus, there is a meaningful risk that you will feel unsettled in your relationships or in a particular relationship. You may feel unclear about like where you belong, what the boundaries are, how to engage. Your anxieties or your paranoia may be like up the roof, and it's really destabilizing. This is a terrible time for processing. This is a terrible time for trying to make things stable, permanent, or even to try to make them make sense. Your anxieties in your relationship may be intuition, but it's not like super likely that it's intuition, to be honest, because Neptune, it gives you so much information that you can't really make sense of it. So it's like being in a really crowded bar and there's tons of music and tons of conversations and like just too many sounds. So you can't really hear anything because you're hearing everything. It's overload. Neptune functions like that. And so you may be gullible, you may be paranoid, you may be insecure during this transit. If you can, tend to the emotions without investing in the stories, the excuses, the justifications that you have sparking those emotions. What you want to do under this transit is fortify yourself. So this is like, for instance, a bad transit for doing a cleanse where you starve yourself. You're not supposed to starve yourself during this transit. You're supposed to nurture yourself. A big lesson of Venus opposite Neptune is boundaries. Depending on how this transit hits your chart, you may need to deal with the consequences of not having had healthy boundaries with someone or in your relationships in general, or you may need to have boundaries like in a situation that pops up now. Either way, it's important that you remember that your boundaries are yours to maintain. Boundaries aren't rules. Rules are something we assert to others. You must not cross this line. Whereas a boundary is, this is the line, and I'm going to maintain that line. So if you cross the line, then I'm going to remove myself from the situation. Then I'm going to let you know, whatever the case may be. Boundaries are yours to maintain. And what often happens under a Venus opposition to Neptune is you feel like you can't, like you feel again like that anxiety of Neptune, that uncertainty of Neptune, and fearfulness. You know, Neptune can kick up like old and really uncomfortable fears. Do your best to act in accordance with your values. In astrology, Venus is values and Neptune is ideals. When they sit opposite each other, you may be really confused about your values or the value you hold to someone else. Again, cope with the feelings instead of justifying the feelings and then trying to deal with them in your life. It's too soupy under a Venus opposition to Neptune. Okay, too soupy. Similarly, but like opposite, you may find yourself super crushed out or fixated on a person, a crush. You may be like in the throes of a parasocial fever dream under a Venus opposition to Neptune. Remember, a one-sided relationship, aka a parasocial relationship, is a relationship that is fed 50% at least by fantasy and projection. Your fantasy and your projection. Okay. And so it's important to ground into reality if you can. If you're finding yourself super crushed out on a person and like fixating on them, I want to encourage you to rein yourself in, and be wary of the role of fantasy and projection in your life and on you. Somebody comes at you today and or around this date and is like, I've been obsessed with you from afar, or whatever, like, you know, give it 72 hours. Minimum 72 hours. If you are a person who really puts a lot of value and weight on the way that you look or the way that you feel or think about how other people feel and think about the way you look, this transit can fuck with you, honestly. It can just put a lot of anxiety and paranoia on how you look. So, do you want to avoid mirrors? I don't know, maybe. But like, do not place a disproportionate amount of value on things that you don't actually value or that you don't believe are great values for you. The final thing I want to kind of warn you about with this transit is that it can coincide with financial problems because Venus is your money. It's what you have liquid, but also the possessions you own, like your couch or, you know, the piece of art over your bed or whatever. Venus is your money and your stuff. Neptune is like the sands through the hourglass. They just keep on falling. It can be loss, right? This is a terrible time to make a financial investment. This is a terrible time for overspending, aka don't do it if you can avoid it. This is a time where you may have to deal with some sort of unexpected expense that just feels like a total bummer to have to pay for. but unfortunately, this can happen with this fucking transit. On a more social, political level, whenever we're seeing a Venus opposition to Neptune, I I am especially on the lookout for like reproductive rights, women's rights, gender nonconforming and trans people's rights, queer rights in general. And this is because of how Venus functions and how Neptune functions in society. We may also see some sort of meaningful shift in the economy. I am not a financial astrologer, but Venus opposite Neptune definitely is a transit that I'm going to pay attention to see some sort of either dip in the economy or some sort of really confusing new legislation or development around the economy. All to say, don't overspend. Now, a meaningful part of the lesson of Venus opposite Neptune is the cultivation and maintenance of boundaries that emerge from a sense of alignment inside of you. In other words, from your embodiment of your values. This transit teaches how uncomfortable it is to not have healthy boundaries, to look outside of yourself for meaning and validation, for a sense of safety and belonging, to betray yourself in order to get validation or love or care from other people. This transit can intensify your empathy so much so that it can make you feel like overstimulated. So again, whether we're dealing with boundaries on a spiritual level for like the highly sensitive empaths and witchy girlies, or we're talking about boundaries in your relationships, this is a time for you to be mindful about your own energetic, psychological, and behavioral boundaries. This is something that I've been talking about a bunch on my Patreon. So if you are somebody who wants to kind of dive deeper into that shit, you can join me over there. But also, there's 7 million resources all over the internet and in books and in the world around boundaries. I encourage you to cultivate a little bit of interest in them. Check them out, see what you find. Now, the next two exact transits are lovely and supportive. They're happening on Tuesday, the 14th of October at 7:10 a.m. Pacific time. Venus will form an exact trine to Uranus. And then at 4:45 p.m. Pacific time, Venus will form an exact trine to Pluto. So Venus trine to Uranus and to Pluto overlapping with the Venus opposition to Neptune is a gift from the heavens, if you will. Venus is being empowered by Pluto to go deeper and to be deeply curious. Venus is being empowered by Uranus to be innovative, to try something new, and to be independent. This all means that you have a spectacular and unique opportunity this week, but especially the first half of the week, to really embody your value system and your boundaries. If you're somebody who's like, I don't know what my values are, I don't know how to participate in my relationships, I don't know how to navigate my feelings of unrest or lack of safety. If you're dealing with any of the shit that I've been talking about, these transits are so remarkably helpful. They're so helpful. Pluto trine Venus, it really does put you in connection with people who can help you. So does Pluto trine Uranus. People who can help you doesn't always mean people who like walk up to you and be like, here's a magic pill. That's not what help is. But somebody who kind of crosses your boundaries in the exact way that you need them crossed in order for you to be like, aha, I know how to assert this boundary. I recognize that I deserve to take care of myself and I'm going to do it in these ways. Maybe they're new ways. Maybe they're ways that you've been like just playing around with embodying. These transits will empower you to be connected to choice, to insight, to your own bravery and your own capacity. So if what you feel called to do or what your circumstances kind of like call you to do is engage with your relationship to fear, then be brave, be curious, be willing to show up for whatever is in your life and have faith in yourself. Have faith in your capacity. having faith in yourself, having belief in yourself is not having faith and belief that you will be perfect and not get anything wrong. It's faith and belief that you will learn from your mistakes and keep with it. That's that's where the magic is in life. Not just based on these transits, but like in life. It's not letting your problems stop you. It's recognizing that what is hard for you is not what is wrong with you. What is hard for you is what needs more care, curiosity, intention, and a greater willingness to learn and to evolve, right? Some people think that nobody changes, that it's not possible for people to change. I do not fucking believe that at all. I have seen people truly change, and I persist in the belief that you can change and I can change. I believe that we can change. And I want to share that belief with you so that you believe in yourself, that you believe in your ability to have healthier boundaries. Now, that doesn't mean believe in like everybody's willingness to change in the way that you think they should change. Part of having healthy boundaries is listening to other people and what they tell you about their boundaries. If somebody says, I don't want to change in X, Y, and Z ways, believing in their capacity to change is not believing in your version of reality being projected onto them. You got to listen to people. If you want to have healthy boundaries for yourself, you must also respect the boundaries of others. And this sometimes means sticky shit that hurts your feelings. But this, my friends, is life. It is life. And life is sticky, is it not? Okay, now that brings us to the next exact transit of the week. On Thursday, October the 16th at exactly 10:43 p.m. Pacific time, the sun will be at 24 degrees of Libra in 7 minutes, and Jupiter will be at the same degrees of Cancer. This is a sun square to Jupiter. This transit is really great and has some things to look out for. A little push, a little pull. Sun square Jupiter can increase your sense of bravery and courage. It can intensify and engage your vitality, your virility, in other words, your health and your wellness, your psychological and your physical resiliency. Very exciting, right? This is a great time for therapies, all the therapies, like talk to your therapist, move your meat suit, all the things. And also, this transit can find you really just like proselytizing to people, not listening, just preaching. I don't know, maybe preaching's your thing, but like most of us don't like being preached to day by day in our personal relationships, anyways. This transit can find you being arrogant, being cocky, taking more than your share, or having to deal with somebody else who's behaving that way. You may, under this transit, sign up for more than you can follow through on. So don't do that. Like the astrology of this week is not great for knowing your boundaries, but it's the assignment, right? It's like the challenge is the assignment. So this is an important time for you to experience your own enthusiasm and the enthusiasm of others, to take risks and chances, to be brave, to, take a bite of the apple, let the juices run down your chin. Like get in there and have fun and have adventures and be open to what's possible. And also, how many apples do you need? One apple? How many apples do you need? One bite? Don't overdo it. The concept of like overdoing it requires that you're aware of what the boundaries are of how much is enough, how much is too much, and also how much is not enough. And honestly, even though that sounds really basic, a lot of us are really unaware of that. A lot of us do not have a clear sense of that. And most of us do not have a clear sense of that in all areas of our lives. Now, that said, in this particular transit of the sun square to Jupiter, this might come up in relationships because we're dealing with the zodiac signs of Libra and Cancer, but it really depends on what it hits in your birth chart. Not everything that happens to you personally is personal to you. And that's kind of like a bitter pill to swallow, but it's also true. Not everything that you do that's wonderful or everything that you do that's shitty is really about the people that you do it to or with, right? This transit can help you to have a broadened perspective and a kind of willingness and ability to take things in stride, which is amazing. But it can just as easily have you taking everything really personally and making a really big deal of it. So we have this really important theme this week of proportion and boundaries. And that Venus opposition to Neptune can feel really bad or demoralized, whereas the Sun square to Jupiter can feel really entitled and a little speedy. And that combination for some people is like the perfect combo to spark anxiety or to have you like do something in a way that makes you uncomfortable with yourself and then you go into an anxiety spiral. So again, what I want to encourage you to do is to not abandon yourself in your feelings. To be there for yourself. And if the situation calls for it, be there for others. Do your best to listen to other people, to listen to yourself. That requires that you're present. That's hard. It's hard. It sounds so basic, but it's hard. Okay. The last thing I'm going to say about this transit is Jupiter governs alcohol. It governs partying, kind of broadly speaking, gambling. And so, this isn't the best time or the easiest time if you're somebody who struggles with overindulgence in drinking, partying in general, or if you tend to try to buy yourself happy. Again, this is where moderation and self awareness come into play. And if you know that this is going to hit your chart in a really particular way, and you know that those are things you struggle with, do your best to put things in place to create support for you in advance of the transit being activated. You'll thank yourself later. And that brings us to the last transit of this week. On Friday, the 17th of October, we've got at 4:40 p.m. Pacific time a sun opposition to Chiron with the sun at 24 degrees of Libra and 51 minutes, completely opposite to Chiron at the same degrees of Aries. This is a challenging transit. Now it's overlapping with the sun square to Jupiter. So this means that Jupiter is either going to expand the challenges of this transit or empower you to make the most of this transit. How it's going to affect you, I can't say specifically. It really depends on how it hits your birth chart mathematically. Okay, that said, the sun opposition to Chiron is confronting. Oppositions are always confronting. They confront you with parts of yourself, often through the vehicle of relationships, right? Oppositions are you, me, us, them. The sun is your sense of self. And Chiron is your core wounding. And so this transit can really confront you with self-esteem issues, with insecurities that you have about who you really are on the inside. It can confront you with feelings of inadequacy, ego troubles, that kind of shit. When Chiron opposes the sun, when the sun is opposite Chiron, what happens is you are likely to be confronted with parts of yourself that you have a hard time accepting or embodying. And again, this can happen through relationships. So you may be in a dynamic with somebody who tells you that you're mean, and your big insecurity is that you're mean, and then you're like, oh my God, and then it just like fucking triggers all kinds of shit inside of you. The opportunity here is a confrontation with yourself that helps you to cultivate greater self-awareness or self-acceptance, or if you're really lucky, self-awareness and self-acceptance. You can emerge from this transit with a stronger sense of self. And that stronger sense of self requires, inevitably, greater self-acceptance. All the awareness in the world doesn't really serve you unless it's paired with emotional integration. So it's not just about being aware of yourself, it's about accepting whatever the awareness is. The sun opposition to Chiron is a time to face yourself. And again, you may need to face yourself in a relationship, who you've been to someone else, how you've been, and what it all means about who you are. This challenging transit can really help you. it can really help you. But you have to be willing to engage honestly with not just who you intend to be or who you thought you were, but who you've been, who you've been. And if you have been hiding from yourself, hiding from others, if you've been struggling with low self esteem or keeping yourself small in some meaningful way, this transit may really activate that so that you can engage with it in a new way. It's not an easy transit, but the overlap with the sun square to Jupiter is actually a gift because it creates more confidence and it creates more of the energy of you wanting to heal. Again, it can just make you feel more arrogant, more entitled, and have you barrel through shit. Or you may be dealing with other people who react in that way, but you can't control other people. You can't control how they behave or how they feel or who they choose to be. But you do have agency over who you choose to be and how you sort through your shit. And the sun opposition to Chiron wants you to sort through your shit. It wants you to work through your core wounding, and it wants you to embody the understanding that what is hard for you, what you're not good at, is not what is wrong with you. It's what needs greater care. It's what needs greater embodiment. It's what needs more support so that you can heal, you know? We talk about fragility a lot. We talk about it in the context of social and political issues, as we should. But the truth of the matter is that fragility is essentially the like practice of collapsing under the weight of your emotions instead of coping with your emotions. And so I want to invite you this week to notice where you collapse into yourself. And for you, collapsing might be getting really angry. It might be getting really tired. It might be any number of things. There's lots of different personalities. You may have any number of reactions to essentially your own fragility. The astrology of this week creates opportunities for you to encounter those parts of yourself and to cope with them, to engage with them, to meet them, to meet yourself in healthier ways, in ways that better reflect your values, and in ways that empower you to stay present in your life and in the world, to participate in ways that help you to become the person you want to be and to co-create the world you want to live in. You know, not like a hero. I'm not encouraging you to don a cape and become someone new. I'm talking about your own evolution, your own progress. Talking about choosing to be here, whatever here means, to be here now, whatever now offers you, and to do your best to meet this moment, even if it's not the moment you wish it was, with as much intention and empathy and accountability as you can. And that, my friends, is this week's horoscope. I'm going to quickly run through all the transits, but as always, I will have a transcript available on my website within about 24 hours. The first exact transit of this week happens on the 13th, where Venus is opposite to Neptune. On the 14th, Venus forms a trine to Uranus as well as Pluto. On the 15th, we have a sun square to Jupiter. And then on the 16th, the sun is opposite to Chiron. I want to thank you so much for joining me this week for Ghosts of a Podcast. And as always, join me on Wednesdays for the midweek reading, where I give a listener an in-depth personal reading. If you would like a reading with me, there's only one way to get that. It's here on the podcast. So you can go ahead and send a question to be considered for the podcast on the contact form of my website, where I have a free chart drawing tool, classes available, access to my Patreon, all the things. And for the rest of this week, I hope you take really good care of yourself and others. And I'll talk to you in just a couple of days. Bye.